May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So those of you who pay close attention to the church calendar, the liturgical calendar, right? You all pay close attention to the liturgical calendar, right? So you may be wondering why in the heck we are today reading about the Transfiguration. You're thinking to yourself, wait, don't we do that like in February towards the end of Epiphany? Yes, you would be right. But one of those quirks with our church calendar is that there are certain feast days which are on fixed dates that occasionally fall on a Sunday. And today is one of those days. The Feast of the Transfiguration, one of the principal feasts of our church year, falls on August the 6th. And when that happened, it takes precedence over the normal day of the calendar. So I just wanted to, for those of you who were confused about why we're doing Transfiguration today, I just want to make sure you knew why. So today we hear Luke's version of this mysterious event that happened on the Mount of Transfiguration. It's one of the really significant moments in the life of Jesus. And in Luke's gospel, it's a hinge moment, if you will, for the whole gospel narrative. It essentially happens kind of at the midway point, if you will, in terms of Jesus' life and ministry. Just prior to today's passage, we have that exchange between Jesus and his disciples where he asks, "Who do you say that I am?" This question of his identity. We know that story ends with Peter saying, "You are the Messiah." Not that Peter or any of the disciples really fully understands what that means, but he answered rightly. And so it's just after this, about a week or so, where Jesus invites three of the disciples, Peter, James, and John, the three that often are asked to do something apart from the others. He invites them to go on a hike, to hike up a mountain. And it's during this hike, we're told that the purpose of it is for Jesus to pray. Now, this is not something unusual. We've seen it throughout the gospel narrative that Jesus takes time away from his very demanding mission to pray. And within that first century context, there was this clear understanding that going up to a high point, like on the top of a mountain, somehow brought you closer to God. So all of this, in a sense, would have made sense to those disciples who he invited to go on this hike. And we're told that on the top of the mountain, Jesus is praying. And it's in this moment that something rather amazing happens. Just after Jesus has talked with the disciples about his identity as the Messiah, during a time of prayer on a mountaintop, Jesus is transformed before the disciples. His face changes, we're told. Don't know exactly what that means. His clothing becomes dazzling white. And there is a sense in which Jesus' glory as the Son of God shines forth. We really can't be entirely sure what exactly happened that day on the mountaintop. It's clear that it was a very mysterious moment. It's clear, I think, that this had something to do with Jesus' true identity. We don't know if this is something that literally happened to Jesus, that if anybody was there, they would have seen it, or if this was some kind of ecstatic, theophanic vision that the disciples were having. But we know that something significant happened in that moment. And that the glory of God shone forth in a way that the disciples had not really experienced before. And then Peter does a very Peter-like thing. Often the first to speak up. He's the kind of guy who speaks and acts often without thinking, right? And in that mysterious moment, Peter tries to seize control of the moment. And he says, "It's good we're here, Jesus. We can now build tents. We can set up tents for you and Moses and Elijah, who happened to be part of this vision," right? They looked up, not only did they see Jesus transformed, but Moses and Elijah were there. How they knew that they were Moses and Elijah, I'm not sure. But somehow they knew. Maybe they were wearing their name tags. And so Peter says, "It's good that we're here. Let us set tents up for you and Moses and Elijah." Now, to our 21st century ears, that sounds really strange, right? But Peter, in this moment, is acting out of his Jewish heritage. He's reverting to Jewish tradition. This really resembles, in a sense, the Jewish celebration called the Feast of Booths, in which literally, as a way of remembering their time in the wilderness after the Exodus, Jews set up tents, they set up booths. It's called the Feast of Booths, as a way of reminding themselves of that time in the wilderness, when they were nomads, when they were in this limbo land between slavery in Egypt and entering the Promised Land. And it was a time, you may recall, when there was a tent of meeting, a special tent that was designated for God and God's presence in their midst. So Peter is remembering this. He's responding out of that Jewish heritage and saying, "Let us set up some tents for the three of you." Moses and Elijah represent that history, that Jewish tradition. So Peter is doing something that is understandable, both in terms of the Jewish tradition and history, but also just in terms of the moment itself. He's trying to take some kind of control of this very strange moment. And as he's saying this, it's like he's not even being listened to. They find themselves in a cloud, and they hear a voice, we're told, that simply says, "This is my Son, the chosen one. Listen to him." So in a moment where Peter is trying to kind of gain some sense of control, they're hearing a voice that simply says, "This is my Son, listen to him." In other words, Peter, shut up. This moment is not about you. This moment is about Jesus. This is a moment in which Jesus' true identity as the Son of God, as divine, is shining forth. Just be here. It's not your job to try to take control of this moment and do something. There's not anything you're supposed to do except to just be here as an eyewitness to this amazing moment, this shining forth of Jesus' divine identity. Just be here. And then listen to him. Now and in the days ahead. Listen to him. The journey of faith that we're all on, in various ways, at various points, it is one in which there is a great deal of uncertainty, a great deal of mystery, and that can be challenging. And human nature is such that in various ways we try to gain some sense of control in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of mystery. We feel like there are things that we need to be doing. And yes, there are. Don't get me wrong. But there are also moments when we're just supposed to be. When we're just supposed to embrace, if you will, and accept the mystery, the tremendous mysteries of God and God's love and God's mercy and God's presence. And to take the time and the space to listen. To listen for the Spirit leading and guiding. And to give thanks that we have these occasional moments where the veil is briefly pulled aside and we see something of the truth in that mystery. This is a lot easier said than done, right? But I think that's what this moment is telling us. That moment was not about Peter and James and John. It was about Jesus, and their role was to be there, to experience it, to embrace the mystery, and to attend to Jesus, to listen to Jesus. Sometimes that's what we're supposed to do. As is often the case when talking about things like the Transfiguration, poetry can help. The poetic. There's this wonderful poem by Anglican priest and poet Malcolm Guite. Some of you may have heard of him, read his stuff. But I just love this poem, so I'm going to end with this. It's titled Transfiguration. For that one moment, in and out of time, on that one mountain where all moments meet, the daily veil that covers the sublime in darkling glass fell, dazzled at his feet. There were no angels full of eyes and wings, just living glory full of truth and grace. The love that dances at the heart of things shone out upon us from a human face. And to that light, the light in us leaped up. We felt it quicken somewhere deep within. A sudden blaze of long extinguished hope trembled and tingled through tender skin. Nor can this blackened sky, this darkened scar, eclipse that glimpse of how things really are. Amen.